Mr. Hockey, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Let's pick up with the baby bonus thread that Barry Cassidy was talking about with Virginia. This fits perfectly with the speeches you made on ending the era of entitlement. Will the coalition bank these savings?
Well, we're going to look very closely at it. The government's taking the baby bonus and applying it in another area of the budget. We are trying to unravel the budget to identify what the real numbers are and what the real impact is.
But just based on principle, surely what the government has done with the baby bonus last night is right up the alley, the arguments you've been making about cutting back on those entitlements.
Well, look, I think the main thing is you've got to look at it in the context of the overall budget and the overall welfare spend. And from our perspective, the numbers just do not tell the truth. There's just a simple question from Wayne Swan today. What is the total amount of debt that you are going to leave Australia with after the 4-year budget? And it is almost impossible to identify that number in the hundreds and hundreds of pages of the budget. But we're going to identify all the numbers and then we'll give you a full and detailed response.
Well, the net debt figure's right there. It's peaking at 11.4% in a couple of years.
Well, that's the net debt figure, but the gross debt, which is subject to the debt limit, is actually not in the budget papers. And that's what matters, because every year Labor's been in, they've increased the debt limit. It was originally 75 billion, they broke that, and then it was 200 billion, they broke that. Last year he said it not above 250, they've broken that, and now it's 300. We believe they're going to break the debt limit in the next 2 years, and they're going to ask whoever's elected after the 14th of September to increase the credit card limit, and that's not good enough.
But every respected economist we've spoken to, we had NAB's chief economist Alan Oster on our show yesterday saying debt is not a problem.
No, because they don't have to repay it.
Is the lowest amongst a lot of Western nations.
Well, but
they're not worried about.
I love economists. They've always got an opinion, but they actually never have to repay it. And the only people that repay it are the taxpayers of Australia. They're the ones that have to repay it. Now, Peter Costello, who paid down Labor's last debt bill of $96 billion, he did it by running big surpluses. If you look at the budget papers for the $191 billion of net debt, the government says, don't worry, we'll repay that by 2022. That means they're going to go from a $6 billion surplus in the last year of the budget to $35 billion surpluses every year to pay off that debt. It's inconceivable, Mike. But this is what they do. This is what Labor do. They overpromise, they underdeliver, and they leave Australians wondering what the hell is going on.
We're talking about Treasury figures here. You're saying Treasury has the numbers wrong.
Well, I'd say the government has the numbers wrong. They're all
the Treasury numbers the government is putting out there. And the same Treasury you'll be using if you win the election on September the 14th.
Their fingers on the same hand, but it's Wayne Swan and Penny Wong that have their names on the front of the budget document. The only document that is really the Treasury's document is the one that is released by the Treasury officials during the election. Now, we go off those numbers because they're as close to honest as you can get. And the fact is the numbers that were released last night are fundamentally dishonest. But what we do know is that the deficits are getting larger, the debt is getting larger. The whole spin last night, Wayne Swan said the budget was about jobs and growth. But the budget numbers actually predict that unemployment's going to rise and economic growth is going to fall. So if the budget's about jobs and growth, it's heading in the opposite direction to what it is today.
A jobless rate rising to what many people would agree is a relatively modest 5.75%.
Why is it modest?
Compared to a lot of countries. You look at European nations.
Let's compare.
The rate is much higher.
Okay, let's compare it to the people we actually do compete with in Asia. And you'd say to yourself, hang on, why does Labor keep benchmarking Australia against the slowest runners in the field? Why doesn't it benchmark us against the people we compete with in Asia or in South America, and then say how we're doing? Now, the fact is, Labor inherited an unemployment rate of around 4.5%, and they're spinning this line that 5.75% is great. Labor inherited a surplus and $70 billion in the bank, and they're saying, don't worry, $300 billion of debt and deficits as far as you can see, that's okay. Well, we don't accept that's okay, because ultimately it's the Australian people that have to pay.
Based on the figures you saw last night, and you've made it very clear that you don't trust them, but when can voters expect to see a coalition government, if one is elected, achieve a surplus?
Well, I'm not going to have a knee-jerk reaction to last night's figures. I mean, you know, you've had more time to look at them than I have, and from our perspective, we will carefully analyse all the details. We're not going to have this sort of overblown rhetoric. We're not going to be making promises we can't deliver. We're going to be measured and considered, and in doing so, believable. And I think the problem Labor has is no one believes them anymore, and Australians, quite frankly, are right.
Can we expect savings plans announcements from Tony Abbott tomorrow night?
You will see savings announcements from us before the election, and obviously,
How soon?
Well,
Because
you'll
see. You keep talking about the release of the pre-election fiscal outcome. It's very important for voters to understand what's going on here. You'll base your costings on that document, which is released 10 days after the writs are issued.
And you know what Labor does? They release their costings the day before the election. So that's their benchmark.
But you're putting yourself in a different benchmark to Labor. You're saying you're much more economically responsible. Let's take Labor out of the equation. This is what you're doing. The document will come out 10 days after the writs are issued. I assume you'll take a few days, a week or so to crunch the numbers. That will leave voters
a very short...
How do you
assume that, Michael?
So you'll get the numbers. And how long do you think you'll take to get the numbers between putting to voters your detailed costing plans?
You will see. You will see our numbers. But I just say to you, the government releases its numbers the day before the election. We'll do better than that, I promise you.
How soon before the election?
You will see them before the election, and well before the Labor Party releases them the day before the election. So we do have a better benchmark. But our numbers, from my perspective, need to tell the truth about the real state of the budget. And unfortunately, given Labor has been promising budget surpluses every year and has never delivered a surplus, we need to try and find out what the real numbers are. I think that's not unreasonable, Michael. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Okay, finally, very quickly, Joe Hockey, on a broader political point, what is happening with this no confidence motion the opposition was touting very heavily after the failed leadership?
Well, we want the focus this week to be on the government's budget, and we've said that in the next sitting fortnight we will introduce a no confidence motion. We thought there'd be further information that would assist us in the debate. We haven't been let down. Wayne Swan promised that this budget would be like all the other budgets he's delivered. He's kept his promise. That's the only one he's kept. And it certainly lets the Australian people down.
Okay, Joe Hockey, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.